Welcome, Bronco Nation, to my new series, Boise State Football 2020 Season in Review. This is part one, offense. We're going to be looking at the offense today. Over the next few weeks, I'm going to be going over the offense, the defense, the special teams, Mountain West as a whole, and then the overall Boise State team preview for 2021. I'm going to keep these videos between 15 and 20 minutes. That's my goal anyway. This first one might be a little bit longer just because I'm introducing the series as a whole. But if you like these videos, please make sure to like and subscribe. I have more regular content during the football season itself, but right now in the postseason here and in between, I'm going to try and produce some regular content as well. So you'll be having stuff coming out regularly every month at least. So make sure to like and subscribe so you can get regular Boise State analysis and top commentary, at least coming from my perspective anyway. All right, so we're going to jump right into this. So first off, let's just look at how Boise State did going through the 2020 season. So 2020 season, we had one. That's the first thing to look at altogether. We weren't even supposed to have a 2020 season. Of course, we had a pretty intriguing 2020 season to look forward to before COVID hit, which of course knocked out major matchups against Florida State and against Marshall. So Boise State ended up having the Mountain West initially canceled their season. They were done. They weren't going to play. And the Big Ten started looking to bring it back. And the Mountain West, the Pac-12 jumped on that bandwagon. So thank you, Big Ten, for allowing us to have a season at all. The Mountain West jumped on that bandwagon, of course, and brought back football. So they did a reduced schedule, only 8 games. And Boise State ended up only playing a 7-game conference schedule, or having a 7-game scheduled to play because they were going to play BYU. So Boise State came in, 8 games set up. Let's see how they did. So first game against Utah State went very well. First home opener, first game of the season, 42-13. Boise State's off to a 1-0 start there, with Hank Bachmeier having a pretty nice game for coming back at the start of the season here. 268 yards, 3 touchdowns, no interceptions. George Lonnie also had 100 yards and a touchdown. Next game at Air Force. Hank Bachmeier is out due to COVID. He cannot play. In steps Sears. What an incredible product. It's amazing how Boise State always has at least 2 quarterbacks every year who can step up, fill the shoes, next man up, and play incredibly. So Sears steps up. Jack Sears sets up the transfer from USC, leads Boise State to 49-30 win over Air Force at altitude with 280 yards and 3 touchdowns. Unfortunately, in that game, Helani gets hurt, and so does Octavius Evans. Boise State 2-0 going into BYU, the biggest game of the season for Boise State. They're currently 21 at this point, going up to face BYU, who's number 9. BYU coming to Boise State, that is. BYU number 9. This game does not go as planned. Jack Sears, early in the game, gets taken out with a head injury. He's out for a few weeks. And then we also lose John Bates, gets injured in the first half of that game as well. We're down to a 3rd-string quarterback, which was really the 4th-string quarterback in this case. Wasn't even supposed to be the primary starter there. We were supposed to be able to have Chase Cord back, but his injuries, lingering injuries, ended up not even quitting the team at one point because of those injuries, and then had to bring him back to be a backup later on. Anyhow, Caden Fennigan was not supposed to even be playing this year. True freshman back from Mission, hasn't played football in 2 years. Caden Fennigan stepped up as well as he could, was not an adequate backup, and the defense just got overwhelmed. 17-51 loss for Boise State. In that game, though, Khalil Shakir had a nice game, 139 yards, and the 2 offensive touchdowns that Boise State did score in that second half. All right, Boise State comes back. All right, shaking off the loss. Plays versus Colorado State. Colorado State comes into Boise State. Boise State puts up the right kind of 50 for the Boise State on the blue. That's the kind of 50 we like to see on the blue. Bachmeier is back. He has a decent game. The real highlight of there, of course, is his 202 yards and a touchdown. And special teams defense plays incredibly. Offense only scores 4 touchdowns, but Boise State's still able to win 52-21, gets to 3-1 on the season. And then they go to Hawaii, 40-32 in that matchup, improving to 4-1. Van Buren has a really nice game, 113 yards and 2 touchdowns. And then San Jose State and UNLV games both canceled, really knocks out Boise State's chances of being able to impress the committee at all, even if there was a hope, which the hope was slim, if any. That gets knocked out the window. Boise State ends up going into their final regular season game at Wyoming, 17-9 in the snow. Does improve to 5-1 there. Managed to score 2 touchdowns in that matchup. Khalil Shakir also has another nice game. He scores 100. Gets 105 of the 181 receiving yards. So out of the 181 yards passing, he got 105 of them. So almost the entire offense there. Helani has a receiving touchdowns, but then he is hurt again. He's going to be out for the rest of the season. come into the Mountain West Championship game. A lot of hopes here. They're hoping to salvage the season in some way here, going into 5-1. Doesn't look like Boise State's going to be getting any into the New Year's Six, or definitely they're not in the New Year's Six at this point. But hoping to end the season on a good note. Unfortunately, San Jose State comes in well prepared to play in their first Mountain West Championship game, and they end up winning this game 20-34. The Boise State offense just looks really anemic in this one. Bachmeier only 20 of 41, so he completes less than half of his passes for 221 yards, is sacked 4 times, and his overall quarterback rating is 29.8%. I think in the aftermath that it resulted after this, of course, the Boise State team decides they don't want to play in a bowl game as a team on that decision, and then Brian Harsin leaves. Having had Brian Harsin leaving at the end of the season, I think it makes sense why Boise State played the way they did in the San Jose State game. First off, huge props to San Jose State for coming in prepared and ready to play in this one. They did a great job. But Boise State, really, they looked unfocused. They didn't look, unfocused, that's what I'm going for. They didn't look prepared in this one. I think a lot of that was the issues and indecision with Brian Harsin there. Just with the emails that had come out, he was clearly dissatisfied with the university. That was a big distractor. If you really want my overall analysis of the last game, Boise State season, go back and watch my Boise State review of the San Jose State game. Don't make excuses. This was a clear win by San Jose State, and Boise State should have been able to come in and win this game, but they didn't. What I provide is reasons for why that maybe didn't happen. Go back and watch that video. I'll put the link in the description. But that's a pretty good overall. I go really in depth, part A and part B, into why Boise State, how that game went and how it fared. So I'm not going to go into that anymore. But that's Boise State's season in a nutshell. Ends the season 5-2. Disappointing season per se for Boise State standards, of course. Playing a limited season and only getting to 5-2 and not winning the Mountain West Championship game, but considering that everything that Boise State went through, considering the COVID issues, considering the major injuries to key players, I mean, we're talking about your top 1 and 2 quarterbacks, and then top second string quarterback, of course, staying out pretty much the rest of the season there. He came back, but he didn't end up playing as far as primary starter role there. And then Halani pretty much being out. After the Air Force game, he did come back for the Wyoming game, but he didn't look himself and got injured again, and then he was out the rest of the time. And he was pretty much the entire rushing offense for Boise State. Van Buren tried to step up. We'll talk about that later. He tried to step up into that role, but he didn't have the overall skill set that Halani did. And then issues with the tight end. John Bates supposed to be one of the key receivers. He goes out of the BYU game. Octavius Evans supposed to be a key contributor. He goes out. Just the issues that Boise State dealt with this year, the fact that they were still able to make it to the Mountain West Championship game and have the season that they did, still getting to 5-2, which I think is a nice record for the year that they had. Not up to Boise State standards, but definitely up to, I think, a group of 5 team as far as what they're perceived. I think Boise State's should be held to a Power 5 standard based on how they've played over the last decade. But going off group of 5 standards, it was a solid year for Boise State here, coming in with so many difficulties and issues to deal with. Still getting the Mountain West Championship game, which is that ultimate goal, but not getting the crown. Overall, I'm going to be grading Boise State's offensive performance this year as a B-. I think that's understandable. I think if the San Jose State game had gone a little bit differently, it could have been a B+. But when you're looking at Boise State's offense overall, Boise State scored 33.9 points per game. However, on offense, if you take out field goals and you take out scores done by the defense, the special teams, Boise State only scored 25 points per game, which is very, very low by Boise State standards. I mean, that's barely, you're talking just over 3 touchdowns a game is what they're looking at offensive production, which is really not up to the Boise State standard of excellence and explosive power, and really not up to the standard of what this team can be. This team, I think, has a lot of potential. When they're healthy, I think they are going to be a challenge. They're going to be a sight to behold. And, of course, Andy Avalos being hired, come in as new Boise State head coach, bringing with him Tim Plow, who was incredible offensive coordinator at UC Davis. We'll look at him here in a second. I think I'm very hopeful for the way Boise State is going to be going here in the future. So having looked at Boise State overall, let's look at the statistical performers of the season, and then let's look at what issues Tim Plow has to deal with for Boise State going forward here. So just overall, passing, Top two passers on the team, of course, Hank Bachmeier going to be number one there. 1,150 yards, 6 touchdowns, 2 interceptions, but he was sacked 12 times, only had a long of 55 yards. Real issue this team was with the offensive line. Sears, 332 yards and 3 touchdowns within limited game action, the one game that he played as his primary starter there for Air Force and then getting injured against BYU, but still 332 yards, 3 touchdowns. He was only sacked 1 time and threw for a long of 75 yards. So great performance, I think, for Jack Sears. Hank Bachmeier and Jack Sears, by the way, both coming back for 2021. We're going to have both of them on the team. It's going to be an exciting an exciting competition in the spring and the fall there to see who gets that starting role. Whoever happens, I'm leaning towards Hank Bachmeier. I think he brings a explosiveness and a creativity to the game that's really unmatched by any other player. But Jack Sears is an incredible player, much more of a traditional pro-style quarterback. Whoever Boise State ends up selecting as their starter there, and I fully trust Andy Avalos and Tim Plow here. Whoever they end up selecting is going to lead the team to great success. Rushing, very disappointing rushing year for Boise State. Van Buren, after Helani went out, he became the primary rusher. He had 382 yards, only averaged 3.4 yards per carry, had only a long of 17, and he had 8 touchdowns. Khalil Shakir actually was the second leading rusher on the team, 148 yards, 8.7 yards per game, and a long of 28. And of course, George Helani with his 100 yards in his first game and then limited action after that. He had 108 yards overall for an average of 5.7 and a touchdown. As far as receiving goes, Khalil Shakir again leading the pack. Khalil Shakir is going to be our offensive player of the year. Incredible job by him. 52 receptions for 719 yards, averaging 13.8 yards per catch, 6 touchdowns, long of 52. He had 4 100-yard games. Incredible performance. C.T. Thomas, 20 receptions for 347 yards, 2 touchdowns, long of 75. And then Riley Smith rounding it out here with 15 receptions, 155 yards, and a touchdown. Interesting to note is John Bates, even though he only played 3 games before his injury, had 12 receptions for 117 yards and a long of 28. That really shows you what a key performer John Bates was and how big his impact his injury was taking him out of the season and how it kind of changed the tide for Boise State as far as their overall offensive production. I mean, before the BYU game, Boise State offense-wise, they averaged 42 points per game their first 2 games there against Air Force and against Utah State. So they were doing an incredible job before those injuries and setbacks. I think it would have been a very different season if those hadn't occurred. So looking at our top newcomer, we already said top offensive player of the year is going to be Khalil Shakir. Top newcomer, definitely Jack Sears. Transfer from USC, played incredibly. I think he's going to be a big part of this Boise State offense. Hopefully next year, if not in the starting role, definitely going to move him in and use him. I'm not going to say gimmick. I think they're going to have a definite package for him to be used as a definite primary offensive weapon in this offense that we have. Even if Hank Bachmeier is a star, I definitely think we're going to see Jack Sears out there. If anything happens to Hank Bachmeier in the future, Jack Sears will be a great backup for Boise State Broncos there. Okay, so as I said, we already know Bachmeier and Sears are returning. We have also got a hard commit for offensive lineman Dante Harrington, said he's coming back, and Khalil Shakir not declaring for the draft. He's coming back. He's a junior. He's going to come back and play his senior year. So great to see. Khalil Shakir, we were talking about the stats overall. Like I said, 4 100-yard games. He is a competitor. When you talk about an athlete that never gives up, Khalil Shakir is one of those players. Incredible. And even when Boise State was down like they were against BYU, no hopes of winning the game, he's still playing his heart out. Incredible athlete. I'm so glad we have him on the team. I'm so glad that he's coming back. Not returning. We do have 2 players not returning. There's some other players, other seniors who could potentially leave that haven't made a statement either way. But right now, we know for a fact that John Bates has declared for the draft. So sad to see him go. I don't think he ever fully lived up to his true potential due to some injuries here and there. But wishing him all the luck. I think he's judging the field based on how many players are going to be returning from with the COVID exception and feeling like they're going to come back. I think he's judging the field and feels like this is his best chance to get drafted. So all the best wishes to him, but he's definitely going to be missed. Nick Crabtree, he's decided he's not declaring for the draft. He's deciding to focus on his professional life. So a big offensive line loss there. Of course, a starter this year, one of the 4 starters on the offensive line, 4 new starters, on the offensive line. Just turmoil and turnover in the offensive line this year. So one of the 4 new starters offensive line, I think he had a pretty good year. Of course, he had an injury bug that he dealt with a little bit there. He will be missed. Best of luck to him on his professional career. Like I said, key players who haven't announced: Octavius Evans, C.T. Thomas. We got 2 linemen, and then Jake Sturtz. We've also the 2 linemen are Jake Sturtz and Uzi Usuji. I'm really bad with Pacific Islander names. I'm sorry. I know I'm messing that one last up. Main fact is we got 2 key offensive linemen, Octavius Evans and C.T. Thomas, who haven't declared out of the way. Hopefully they're going to be coming back. So let's look at Tim Plow. Before we look at the issues that Tim Plow has to address, I'm going to look at 3 key issues on offense that Tim Plow really needs to address in the offseason for Boise State to be and back to the offensive powerhouse that they have been historically. Let's look at who Tim Plow is. He is an incredible hire. I could not be more excited for him. So coming from UC Davis, where he's been the coach for the last 3 years, previous to him coming to UC Davis, UC Davis in the 5 years that the stats were available, going back to 2012, averaged 24.6 points per game with a low of 19 and a high of 28. Okay? In the 3 years that Tim Plow was offensive coordinator, UC Davis averaged 30.9 points per game. 24.6 before he came in the 5 years before he came, 30.9 in the 3 years that he was there. His low was 29 points per game in 2019, so kind of a drop off for him. But his low is higher than the high of the 5-year average before he came in. So his 3-year low was higher than any of the five years before he ever came in. And that was his low point. His high points, he averaged 34 points per game and 40 points per game. Incredible job. The high point there being 40 points per game. The most points per game that UC Davis has scored in at least going back to 2012. That's the last time I could find data available for them. But incredible job. This is a guy, he has a quote here from one of the interviews he did after coming and taking the job. He doesn't even look at the scoreboard until it rates half 100. This is the kind of guy that we need coming in who's going to bring back that Boise State offensive dominance. We're talking Boise State teams that dominate in the first half and the second half, not taking their foot off the pedal. Teams that are the defenses quivering in their cleats having to face them. This is a Boise State, he's got that true blue collar mentality. He's not Boise State related as far as having any of the blue blood in him, but he will now. He's going to be part of the Boise State family. We're so excited to have him here. I'm so excited that he's come here to Boise State. I think he's going to do a great job of taking these players that I've talked about here, these players who had a down year perhaps with the issues that we have with 2020. But this is a Boise State team that I think has a lot of potential, and we'll talk about that more in my final video of this series, Boise State Team 2021 preview. But he's going to do a great job as the offensive coordinator. So let's look real quick, because I'm coming up on 17 minutes here. Let's look real quick at the biggest issues that Tim Plow needs to fix in the offseason. This will be the 3 keys to the offseason. So the first one is lack of depth in key position. And what I mean by that is not necessarily the number of players we have there, but the number of quality skilled players that we have there. So building depth. We'll just go through I'm just going to go through big 4 here: quarterback, running back, tight end, and wide receiver. So in quarterback, of course, first and second string are incredible. Either of them could be starters at any Group of 5 or Power 5 program, I have no doubt. But the third string, quote unquote third string, really was the 4th string coming in. Caden Finnegan. He didn't have what it took this year, and I'm saying that hadn't played for 2 years. As an untested true freshman. I think he shows potential, and he's going to need coaching to get to that level. But he wasn't, a Jalen Henderson level 3rd string quarterback. I know we all remember 2019, incredible job that he did coming in at 3rd string and leading Boise State on, I believe it was a 4-0 run in the Mountain West Championship game before going into that bowl game that he unfortunately didn't get to start in that one. But that's not the level of 3rd string backup that we have right now. Now, I think Caden Finnegan can be developed into that. We also have a dual threat quarterback coming in with the recruiting class, Taylon Green. Sorry, I kind of messed up my handwriting on this one, so it's kind of hard to read. I believe it's Taylon Green. Anyhow, he had, over his junior and senior year, over 4,000 yards passing between his upperclassman year, junior and senior year there, 25 touchdowns, adding on to that 445 yards rushing and 2 touchdowns on the ground his junior year. Junior and senior year there. And this is a top-level talent. He's a 3-star recruit. I think he's number 21 overall, number 22 for dual threat, according to ESPN, number 21, according to 247 7 Sports. So I think that he's a player that can come in and contribute right away, potentially. Of course, with the NCAA, you can play 4 games as a freshman and still have a redshirt year. So that might be something that we're looking at here with Taylon. But he's a quarterback that could potentially be that great third-string quarterback that can keep Boise State at that level of success if, God forbid, something happens to the starters like it did this year. Of course, this was a unique year, and hopefully we don't face that next year. But if it did, I think this is a top-level quarterback who we could see definitely in the starting role at some point in his Boise State career. Running back, so no running backs recruited in this class. Very surprising move. I don't think it was for lack of trying, but no running backs recruited, and that is probably the number one issue as far as depth goes for Boise State right now, as far as not really even having a top-level second string back, and nothing against Van Buren. I think he plays his heart out. I think he plays his very best. But like I said before in my other videos, he reminds me much more of a Jack Fields type of running back. He's a running back that can give you some power, get you a couple of yards, but he's not going to be dazzling. He's not going to be breaking tackles. He's not going to be juking and spinning his way down the field for those 20-plus yard carriers, as we saw only a high of 17 this year. He's not a Holani-level running back as far as taking over that load. Now, hopefully Holani comes back next year healthy, is able to play the whole year without any issues. But if Boise State likes to sub in, we need players that are going to be able to spell the other running backs. And there's definitely a significant drop-off when Van Buren is in the game versus Holani. So hopefully, right now, no running back coming in the class. After you get Van Buren, it's Danny Smith, and that's really it. I believe there was a running back that was put on red shirt that behind Danny Smith that didn't see any action. But however, there's no, when you look at Boise State running backs, it's kind of been running back running back university. They've created such incredible running backs, and they've almost always had great running backs behind them. McNichols had Alexander Madison, Jay Ajayi had McNichols, DJ Harper had Ajayi, Doug Martin had Harper, and Jeremy Avery. At one point, Boise State had Ian Johnson, Doug Martin, DJ Harper, and Jeremy Avery on the same roster. Let that sink in for a second. 2008, Boise State had Ian Johnson, one of the greatest Boise State running backs, of course, from that memorable 2007 Fiesta Bowl. Doug Martin, next to, I put him up there with Jay Ajayi as probably, in my mind, the 2 best running backs in Boise State history. I think it's really hard to try and pick between the 2 of them there. And then DJ Harper, who had some injuries that he had dealt with, but it was an incredible speedster and talent. And then Jeremy Avery, who was a great threat in the receiving game and also a great threat in the running game, and it was actually the second leading rusher in 2008 behind Ian Johnson. So Boise State is used to having that incredible workhorse backfield depth, which they just don't have this year. Holani, incredible top-level talent. Van Buren, great, amazing player as far as he gives his heart out on the field, but he just doesn't have that second-level breakaway speed and talent that Holani does. And then Danny Smith, I think he was a sophomore this year. I'd have to look that up again. Underclassman, still being developed, but right now not showing those sparks that those other players I just listed off, those Boise State greats did. And so I think that there definitely needs to be some development there, that Tim Plow can come in. The recruiting class isn't necessarily completely locked up yet. We only got 16 recruits in this class, so a very small class to come in. Hopefully, Tim Plow, just coming into Boise State, maybe he can convince transfer to come over. I could always get a late signee that didn't attract any attention. Boise State's always been great at finding those diamonds in the rough. So maybe that happens, but right now there definitely needs to be some major development there. That's going to be a big issue for Tim Plow to come in. Of course, Winston Venable, the actual running back coach there, but Tim Plow to come in and hopefully improve going into next season. Tight end situation wasn't great. After Bates went out, it was pretty much just Riley Smith, who did a great job. Of course, incredible athlete, former quarterback, and I think that he's going to feature into the offense, especially as a receiving threat, but I think we could see him as maybe some trick play. Off the court, the announcers were rooting for that all year long. They kept saying, all right, Riley Smith out, all right, he's out there, right, let's see if we get a double pass, and we never got one. So hopefully that's getting worked up for next season. But we only did get one tight end in the recruiting class, but it's better than none. Matthew Lauder there. And again, I apologize if I'm butchering these names. Once I start hearing them, once they start, they're part of the family, but once they start getting on the field and making an impact, they'll become more routine and normal as far as my lingo goes here. But he had 316 yards, 3 touchdowns his junior year, so he's a capable receiving threat. Might be able to come in. Then we also have some other tight ends in the roster there that did get some receiving yards this year, but not as significant impact players that might develop coming into next year. Wide receiver. So wide receiver was a group that looked incredibly deep for Boise State, but then it ended up being really only two guys that were getting that primary focus and being key players on the offense. It was very surprising. I didn't think wide receiver was a section that needed depth issues, or had depth issues that needed depth. Sorry. So Shakir and Thomas, once Octavius Evans went out with the injury, it was pretty much just Shakir and Thomas. That was it. That was basically the entire Boise State wide receiver passing game. Stephon Cobbs and Billy Bowen did a good job of stepping up, and I think that they have talent that could be improved on next year. But that was really it. I mean, once you get those four players, and like I said, Shakir and Thomas being really the only two guys that got any attention, it really limited the options for where Hank Bachmeier or Sears could throw the ball around. Hank Bachmeier there, of course, at the end. And, of course, limited Boise State's capacity, I think, to have fresh top-level talent out there on the field to really mix it up and get creative out there. Boise State did get 3 wide receivers in this recruiting class, so it was a heavy emphasis for them. And one of the most exciting is Eric McCallister, and I'm pretty sure I got that name exactly right. So hopefully, at least maybe I'm 1 for 5 here. But anyhow, he's 6'5" and had 43 touchdowns over the past 2 seasons. So he is a great talent. He's and when you just look at overall athletic ability, I mean, just overall athletic stature, 6'5", 43 touchdowns the past 2 seasons. He's a guy who come in right away, get into that rotation, and be a key receiving target, key offensive threat there for Boise State. So hopefully he can get developed. Anyhow, that was a really long first key. Sorry, went into that. And again, I'm hitting 26 minutes. So this is definitely going to be the longest of my videos. I promise I'll keep the rest of them under 20 minutes. But anyhow, going in here, maybe 25. We'll say 20. I'm really going to struggle to shoot for that 20-minute mark. But anyhow, so the first key, lack of depth at key positions, we kind of went over and outlined those different areas of issues. The second key for the offense offseason is the O-line struggles need to get fixed. It was really the weakest part of the offense for Boise State this year. They didn't look dominant in the trenches. They only were able to amass or help push forward and amass 105.9 rushing yards per game. Now, of course, that's not all on the offensive line. That's also going to be on the running backs. But 105.9 yards per game is the lowest amount of rushing yards that Boise State has attained in their FBS history, going all the way back to 1996. Lowest in the FBS history. I didn't count up all 1996 through 2020 and do the average and figure out how many they'd get overall before that. But I did go through and look at every single year, and 105.9 is the lowest per year. And to just give you an idea, most seasons Boise State has averaged at kind of a low of 140 to highs of 200 plus between 1996 and 2019. That's what Boise State was at. I mean, they never had less than 140 yards per rushing per game in their let's see, how many seasons is that? 24 seasons in the FBS. So Boise State really struggled this year offensively, and it's not all on Van Buren, and it's not all on the offensive line. It's going to be a mixture of both of those, but I think the most of this does rest on the offensive line, not being able to win the battle in the trenches and look dominant. And on top of that, Boise State allowed 15 sacks in only 7 games. 15 sacks in 7 games, 4 of those were in the Mountain West Championship game, and what's not included in that number is all of the hits on Hank Bachmeier, on Caden Finnegan, and a couple on Sears, but the quarterback hurries and hits that were added on top of that. I mean, you added on those on top of that. I mean, we'd be looking at in the 30-plus range. At one point, I was going through the game and counting every time that Hank Bachmeier got hit, and he was getting hit 7-10 times a game on top of the sacks. So the offensive line, like I said, we got one player who's not coming back. We've got a couple players that are, or one player for sure, and then a couple players that might be. And then we have 3 offensive tackles that were, offensive linemen that were recruited in the for the recruiting class here. And Mason Rudolph is probably one of the most exciting members of that. And we also have another we also have another offensive tackle who might be joining the team. He's committed but not signed. So Mason Rudolph looks like a player who could come in and potentially start right away. Really incredible, dynamic, aggressive player. So, but whatever happens, whether it's through coaching the players that are there, of course, hopefully there'll be more stability next season with less new starters on the line, or it's bringing in these new guys and replacing players on the line there. Whatever happens, that's got to be Tim Plow's really number one focus this season, is off season. It's fixing the O-line struggles, because without an O-line, you can't do anything. Without being able to get that push, doesn't matter how good your running back is. If he's having to break 2 tackles before he crosses the line of scrimmage, he's not going to be getting anywhere. And if your quarterback can't get the ball off, then it doesn't matter how good your wide receivers are, your tight ends, or anybody else. So that's got to be really it's number 2 here, but it's really, I think, the biggest key to the offseason here. All right, so this is the final one, third key of the offseason, and I promise we're almost done here. So third key of the offseason, Boise State's got to keep their foot on the pedal for both halves. That was a real issue, was taking their foot off the pedal in the second half. With the exception of the BYU and San Jose State games, we take those games out of the equation because those were just bad offensive performances overall. If we talk about Boise State's first half to second half performance without the BYU San Jose State game in there, Boise State averaged 19.6 points per game in the first half. Still not great, but in the second half, they only averaged 11.2 points per game. So 19.6 to 11.2. They went from almost 3 touchdowns per game, almost 3 touchdowns per half in the first half, to barely 2 touchdowns. I mean, less than 2 touchdowns in the second half. Really, really abysmal drop-off, and a lot of that, I mean, you just take out the scores here, you just start looking at the overall effort. You've got to go through and watch every game, of course, but having seen every game that happened this year from start to finish, and I stayed to the finish even on those hard ones, Boise State's offensive production in the second half looked lethargic. In the first half, Boise State looked explosive and creative for the most part. They looked decently explosive and creative as far as mixing it up, keeping the defense on their toes. Could have done a better job, I think, overall. Of course, that low score average that we have overall in the season. But they looked pretty good in the first half. Second half, they looked terrible. They looked predictable and conservative in the second half. Pretty much just run, pass, up the middle, deep throw towards the middle, incompletion or interception. Really, and that's part of the reason that the overall average score is so low, is because that second half drop-off. If the first half had been continued in the second half for the whole season, I think Boise State's offense might even get an A- or so or more on this season. However, just not pushing it through in the second half, and that is exactly why we need a new offensive coordinator like Tim Plow, who's going to come in and not look at the scoreboard until it reads half 100. There's running up the score, which you could talk about that as far as sportsmanship goes, but you have to have that mindset. If you don't have the mindset that you are going to push to win the game, 0-0, no matter what the score is, if you don't have that mindset for every game, then you're going to, the games that you need it, you're not going to have it. It's not going to be in your team chemistry. It's not going to be in your team DNA. So Boise State, they need to be getting out there Jim Harbaugh style and pushing up, running up the score in the second half, not taking their foot off the pedal until you get in the last few minutes of the fourth quarter there, so that Boise State always has that offensive, that aggressive mindset throughout the game, and there's never a point when they're thinking, we've got this, we're okay, we can just relax. That Boise State should be there. They should have players fighting for their positions. They should have players fighting to be on the field and fighting to get into that end zone every single play all the way through. If it's, I'm not saying keep the starters out there the whole game, but if once the second string get brought in, keep them firing at them, keep them being aggressive, give them real game time experience to learn and see what they can do if they have to be that second man up, which is that depth issue we talked about. See what they can really do and get them into that mindset for when they are the first string and the game is in the balance and they have to come in and push for the win. If they're only in the mindset every time they get on the field, they're just pretty much just running down the clock, they're not going to have that natural tendency and that natural character to push for the win in the end. So I think Tim Plow is a great hire. I think he's going to do a great job of fixing these 3 issues, which are, again, lack of depth in key positions, offensive line struggles, and Boise State taking their foot off the pedal in the second half. I'm getting real close to being, I'm at 33 minutes already, so I'm going to wrap this up real quick here. Boise State, I think that the offense is in great hands. We're going to talk about them more once we get to the end of the series and we do our team preview. So we'll talk about them more then. But thank you for watching this video. Again, if you like the content, make sure to like and subscribe. Lots to work on from last year, but I think a lot of hope and potential going into this 2021 season. I'm very excited to see what Tim Plow and, of course, Andy Avalos is going to be very involved, I think, in that as well. What Andy Avalos and Tim Plow can do to really put this Boise State offense back on track and back into into getting those A+ grades that we're used to from Boise State offense. So thank you again for watching my video. Make sure you join Bronco Nation Updates, over 8,000 members, a Facebook group if I didn't say that. Bronco Nation Updates, over 8,000 members, great place to just key in with other Boise State fans and root on all our great Boise State athletic programs. And then, as always, hashtag cancel the CFP playoff committee and go Big Blue.